So, as you know, I live on the Upper East Side and walk through the park every day. If the West Side is the promised land and the East Side is the diaspora, then Central Park is like the wilderness, no man's land, that place that belongs to everyone. East Siders don't have to feel inferior in the park, and West Siders seem to drop their demonstrable superiority. No one knows where you live, and no one cares. In the park, you simply become a New Yorker, except for all those infuriating tourists. They truly are the lowest of the low. Try as they might, they don't even approach the level of East Siders. And that's really not a high standard to begin with. They clog the pathways of the park with their incessant chattering and photo taking as if they have never seen a squirrel before. For the life of me, I still can't figure out what is so fascinating about a Central Park squirrel. And you know, from the squirrel's perspective, they just give off this air that tourists never really get, but we New Yorkers do, that says to them, nuts to you. I love my 15-minute walk through the park. There's an entire human ecosystem there. My days are framed by entering and exiting Central Park, coming and going, entering and exiting, and in between, a whole universe. Entering and exiting the park, exiting and entering. When I can no longer do that, I'll know that I have moved to another phase of life. I saw one of my favorite people in Central Park this week. When I first encountered her 10 years ago, she was a new mother. She was obviously a West Sider. You could tell by the air of sophistication and superiority that radiated from every self-assured step. Back then, she had two small boys who walked with her through the park. They were obviously on their way to the East Side. I would usually see them around Sheep Meadow near what is now Le Pain Quotidien. I could only surmise that for some unfathomable reason, this West Sider decided to send her boys to an East Side school. It's what we call in Yiddish a shanda. An embarrassment that is best not spoken about in public. When I first began to notice this family all those years ago, one of the boys wasn't even old enough to go to school. He joined his mother and older brother only a few years later. I would see this family regularly, not every day, but frequently enough to begin to notice them. And I even began to anticipate that I would see them. I felt as if we were friends, even though we have never exchanged even a word, not to this day. Sometimes in recent years, I would see the woman walking alone. Boys, when they reach a certain age, don't really want to walk to school with their mothers until they reach a certain age when they do. What we wouldn't give to walk to school again with our mother. I could only surmise that that woman herself might work on the East Side. Why else would she be walking alone every morning at the same time of day? This is actually understandable because even you would concede that many of the good jobs are on the East Side. I must not have seen the woman and her boys for quite a while, and I wasn't thinking of them when there she was on Monday at the same place at the same time with one of her boys. She looked the same to me. The years had been kind to her. And of course, it goes without saying that I looked the same, even better. But what struck me was her boy. I remember this kid as a 6 or 7-year-old. I still had that mental image in my mind. When I saw him this week, he was a giant. He looked that way to me anyway, but then again, everyone looks tall to me. The kid was tall and gangly and a bit geeky, just what you would expect from a West Side teenager. He was a different person. The mother looked the same, but the child, well, he was no longer a child. When he first entered the park 10 years ago, he was a boy. Now, he's a man. And that got me to thinking of the mother and me. She may look the same, and I might look even better than before. But we're both 10 years older. And the thought popped into my head. Entering and exiting the park is a metaphor for our lives. We enter on one end, we spend time in the center, and we exit on the other side. There is a verse in this week's Torah portion, Vayomer aleihem ben 120 shana anochi hayom, lo uchal od latzet velavo, v'Adonai amar elai lo ta'avor et hayarden hazeh. And Moses said to the people, I'm 120 years old today, and I can no longer exit and enter. And God told me that I shall not cross the Jordan River. Moses uses this phrase, latzet velavo. I can no longer come and go. I can no longer exit and enter. And commentators were puzzled by this turn of phrase. What it seemed to imply is, I can no longer be physically active. I no longer have the strength. But we're told at the end of Deuteronomy that even in his last moments, Moses never lost his vitality and vigorousness. So the Bible couldn't have meant that Moses had lost his physical capacities. And this led Rashi to conclude that what Moses meant when he said, I can no longer exit and enter, is he could no longer exit and enter the world of Torah. Learning, teaching, absorbing new information, the fountain of wisdom, every distinctive thing about human life was now closed to him. And it's such a beautiful image. Our physical capacities are critical to us, but we are measured distinctively by our intellect. We enter the garden of knowledge, its fountains open to us. We come and we go as we please, every day renewed. This is the garden of life. This thing we call life is paradise. But even Adam and Eve had to leave paradise. There came a day when they could no longer come and go in the garden as they pleased. The exit and the entrance to the garden were sealed. And what this gangly teenager reminded me of is the rapid passage of time. We are living on borrowed time. Time is the most precious commodity of all. We can never have enough of it. And during this season, this is our last Shabbat before Rosh Hashanah, we are especially aware of the inevitable, ineluctable passage of time. We have ticked off another year. Like the season itself, we feel the shortening days and the lengthening night. Time disquiets all. Our lives are finite and our time is limited. This is the law of life, and this law gives urgency to life. We must hurry. Time is jealous of us. There is never enough of it. It is the gold of our days that we squander. We read in the Talmud of Rabbi Zerah, who went up to the land of Israel and reached the Jordan River at the very embankment where the Israelites crossed into the Promised Land millennia before. This was the very spot that Moses mentioned in our parsha when God told him, Lo ta'avor et hayarden hazeh, you shall not cross this Jordan River. Rabbi Zerah, knowing this verse all too well, decided that rather than wait for a ferry to allow him to cross, he grasped a rope that stretched across the river like a bridge, and he crossed the river himself. And when asked why he didn't wait for a ferry, Rabbi Zerah responded, I stand at the place where Moses was forbidden to cross. Who can assure me that I should be worthy of crossing into the Promised Land? So I must make haste, lest something happen to me before I complete my journey. Who can assure us that we have the time to get to where we want to go? Who can assure us that we have the time to say to all those whom we love that we love them? Who can assure us that we have another day to come and go as we please, another month, another year, another decade? Hillel the sage urged us, do not say when I have time I shall study, because you may never have the time. It is such a miracle and such a gift to live in the green, luscious, vital garden of life. But there comes a point when we realize that this park has an entrance and an exit, and there will be one day when we will no longer be able to come and go, lavo velatzet, latzet velavo, as we please. One day, all those who currently populate the human ecosystem of the park, they simply will not be there. Others will. All experience is an arch, wherethrough gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades. The long day wanes, the slow moon climbs, the deep moans round with many voices. In the book of Psalms, we read a prayer of Moses, the man of God. O God, you engulf us in sleep. At daybreak, we are like grass that renews itself. By dusk, it withers and dries up. We spend our years like a sigh. They pass by speedily. Teach us to count our days wisely, that we may obtain an understanding heart. The years pass quickly. The infant becomes a child, the child becomes a teenager, and the teenager becomes a man before we even realize what happened. And therefore, the real message of this season is to push on. As long as we have the capacity to enter and exit, let us use our capacity to the fullest. It is a great, good, miraculous gift of life that we have been granted. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust, unburnished, not to shine in use. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts made weak by time and fate, but strong in will. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Amen.